Good evening. I am calling this, sorry. Good evening. I am calling this public meeting to order at 6:05 p.m. in accordance with the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act, MGLC 131, Section 40 in the Boston Wetlands Ordinance, Boston City Code Ordinances, Chapter 7-1.4. The Boston Conservation Commission will hold a virtual public hearing this evening on May 17th, 2023 to review the following projects to determine what conditions, if any, the Commission will impose in order to protect the interests of the public and private water supply, groundwater, prevention of pollution, flood control, prevention of storm damage, protection of fisheries and land containing shellfish, and protection of wildlife habitat. This evening's meeting will be followed by a regular meeting. In accordance with Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, we are conducting this meeting online. To ensure public access to the deliberations of the Conservation Commission, the public may access this call through telephone and video conferencing. Additionally, the meeting is being recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, please turn off your video. Members of the public may have an opportunity to ask questions and provide public comment on applications and discussions. To do so, please raise your hand or type in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you're calling in and cannot use the platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute yourself. Send your questions to staff via email at cc@boston.gov or via Twitter by tagging the Twitter handle @BostonEnviro and using the hashtag ConComHearing. For the record, I am Michael Parker, Chair of the Commission. Could staff present please identify themselves?
Elena Itamari for the Environment Department.
I think Chris is having audio problems, so I'll go to the commissioners present this evening. Commissioner Long?
Nick Long.
Commissioner Wilson?
Mike Wilson.
Commissioner Richmond?
Alice Richmond.
Commissioner Herbst?
Ann Herbst.
Great, thank you. Okay, so just to let the public know, we've had a couple of continuances this evening. Notably, the Taylor Street project is not going to be heard this evening. Neither will 90 Allendale. So those projects will be heard at a later date. I think 90 Allendale will be at our next meeting in June. Excuse me. First item on the agenda is notice of intent for DEP file number 0061941 and Boston file number 2023-030 from the Emerald Tutu for the installation of a floating garden frame and various floating garden prototypes or growing units within the water sheet located east-southeast of Piers Park, Marginal Street, East Boston. Resource areas are land under ocean and coastal beaches. The only thing we were waiting on this one, we've had a complete public hearing, was a DEP file number, and I see we have the DEP file number. So without further ado, I would entertain a motion to close the hearing.
So moved.
Do you have a second? Thank you. Commissioner Long?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson?
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond?
Aye.
Commissioner Herbst?
Aye.
Great, and I vote aye. Next item on the agenda is—
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Good luck, Gabriel. Next item on the agenda is a notice of intent, looks like unassigned DEP file number and unassigned Boston file number from Niche Engineering on behalf of the Fallon Company for the proposed residential condominium development and subsequent landscaping and stormwater improvements located at 1 Harbor Shore Drive, South Boston. Resource areas are land subject to coastal storm flowage, waterfront area, 100-foot buffer to coastal bank. This has been continued from the May 3rd, 2023 hearing. Who's here on behalf of the applicant?
Good evening, John Schmidt with Niche Engineering, and with me is Richard Martini from the Fallon Company. I believe we have a DEP file number 0061938.
Okay. Elena, what does that give us for a Boston file number?
Yes, sorry for that. It is going to be
That's all right. Presumably we have one now.
Okay.
we do,
Okay.
yes. So
Okay, good.
yeah.
Okay, fine. So John, I think where we left it off, we had questions about the sales office and its location.
Sure.
And I think you've made some changes to that. Is there anything else?
No, if you like, we can scroll forward to
Yeah.
the information we submitted regarding the sales office.
Yeah, let's focus on that. Thank you.
One more slide. Okay, so this, as you recall from the hearing we had a couple of weeks ago, this is the construction management plan. And the orange block up in the left corner of the construction area is a temporary sales office. It will be constructed and for the duration of the project. It will be removed prior to project completion. Concerns were raised that it was in a VE zone. And if you go to the next slide. So we've advanced the design on the temporary sales trailer within the VE zone. And what you can see here is a section where the trailer as proposed would be on piles, and the bottom elevation of that trailer would be at the VE floodplain elevation of 19.48 or 19.5. This would allow for the free flow of water, except for the 3 rows of columns, the free flow of water should there be a storm event that causes flooding in this area. We believe this is in compliance with the requirements for construction within VE zones. But we also ask that the commission consider and understand that this is a temporary structure. It will only be here for several years during the construction of the building. And my client would prefer if we could construct this on temporary prefabricated concrete pads. And then should there be a storm event, it would be enclosed with the aqua fence. The same aqua fence that we're using throughout the development, should there be a flood event. That is sort of the extent of our presentation regarding the sales trailer.
Okay, good. Thank you. Just before we go to the commissioners, I want to remind members of the public to provide public comment. Please raise your hand or type in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you're calling in and cannot use the platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute yourself. Send your questions to staff via email at cc@boston.gov or via Twitter by tagging the Twitter handle @BostonEnviron using the hashtag ConcomHearing. Excuse me. I'm going to go to Commissioner Herbst first on this one. This is her area of expertise. What are your thoughts?
Well, my main perspective is it needs to be code compliant, and V-zone does require being on pilings. So if you were to use an aqua fence, the point of the V-zone requirements is that water can flow through freely. So I think you'd actually be increasing the likelihood that it would be knocked off the or relocated. So unless there's something that I don't know about temporary buildings, I assume it needs to comply with the V-zone requirements, and I think it should. For a couple of years, there's the possibility that there would be a storm like that. Thanks.
Okay. John?
My client is here, and if he wishes to speak to this, I welcome his
Yeah, I think the intent for us was to actually try to not disturb the soil, thus not do the piles. The intent would be that the blocks would be heavy, just like the pile caps that are shown on this plan. And the intent of the aqua fence is obviously to surround it. We're already surrounding most of the site with a fence in any storm issues, so the water would never get to the structure. It would actually be outboard of the structure and therefore not be an issue. But if it's a code issue, we're happy to do the piles. We just thought alternatively, it was a better solution to not disturb any of that soil behind the existing foundation wall.
Yeah, I'm sympathetic to that, but I think, your other alternative was to move or shrink the building a bit to get out of the V-zone. So it looks like that's not your choice. So I think you're stuck with the code as it is.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Long, anything?
No further questions.
Commissioner Wilson?
I think I unfortunately missed the first part of the previous hearing on this. The only thing I was kind of thinking is what solutions we used over in East Boston for the Lend-Lease project that went in. There was a temporary sales site that was over there, I believe. I don't know how that was constructed off the top of my head, but there may be some precedent. I know it was elevated and might have been in the VE zone as well. But if that's of any help in terms of for sort of what precedents were, or whether, I don't know if that met our standards back then either. So the maps may have also changed.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Richmond?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Herbst, I think you're, anything else?
I'm all set.
Okay. Elena, did anyone raise their hand?
Sorry, I am having a hard time seeing.
No, we have no comments or hands
Yeah, I
raised.
don't see any. Okay,
Thank you.
okay, great. Okay, so with that, I would entertain a motion to close the hearing, and it's understood that the building will be raised on pilings.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Seconded.
Okay, Commissioner Long,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond,
Aye.
Commissioner Herbst,
Aye.
and I vote aye. That passes 5-0. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, next item on the agenda, notice of intent for DEP file number 0061934 and Boston file number 2023-022 from Engineering Alliance, Inc. on behalf of 6 Brook Street LLC for the proposed renovation of an existing 3-family dwelling in a commercial building located at 6-6A Brook Street in East Boston. Resource area is land subject to coastal storm flowage. Who's here on behalf of the applicant?
Can you guys hear me okay? This is Eric Bradnesi from Engineering Alliance, the civil engineering for the project.
Great.
Perfect, thanks. So I'll try to keep this brief. The project is located at 6-6A Brook Street in East Boston. It is a 2,000 square foot lot. On the image you can see here, it is located entirely within a zone AE, elevation 10 or elevation 1645 Boston City base. If you can move to the next slide. So this is just an existing conditions plan you're looking at here. The 2 buildings in the middle are what we're looking at. The building labeled 3-story wood frame number 6, and the building right next to it, the single-story brick 6A. There is an existing 3-family dwelling on the left and an existing commercial unit 1-story on the right. There's a 3-story porch in the back with a set of stairs, and then there's a little concrete pad in the back. The buildings take up the majority of the project site. And the intent is to keep the buildings the way they are and just add on top. If you could go to the next slide. This is just an erosion control plan. So there'll be straw wattles placed at the rear around the entirety of that concrete area that will be removed. And then the 3-story deck in the back is also going to be removed. And then the next slide as well. So this is the proposed plan. So you can see in the back, we're going to grass over where that concrete area used to be. That's what that hatched area in the back is. And then there'll be construction of a new 4-story deck, as the shaded area is the additions to the building. So there'll be a 1-story addition on top of the existing 3-story residential building. And then there'll be a 3-story addition on top of the single-story brick commercial building. So what this will end up being is a 6 residential unit and 1 commercial unit building. All the work is going to be to basically go upward on this building, and then there'll be some interior renovations on the first floors of the building. You can see the green there is a stormwater system that will be placed under the slab of the single-story building. It's a building that's currently just on a slab. They'll dig out and place that stormwater system underneath. It has been designed to meet the requirements of Boston Water and Sewer. We've submitted to Boston Water and Sewer, and we've received some minor comments back. No major changes. The stormwater system looks good. It's really just tweaking a couple of labels and things. But as far as land subject to coastal storm flowage, so the project, again, the buildings are going to stay exactly as they are. On the structure of the building will stay exactly the same, where the 3-unit building is, you currently step up to get in. So all the living space will be significantly above the floodplain elevation of 1645. So the grade out in Brook Street is anywhere from 15.5 to 16.5, but there's 3 or 4 steps to get in. So the current, so we'll maintain the first floor on the living space, and then all the living space and the new additions will be significantly above. I think they start somewhere around elevation 20, if not higher there, on either one of those buildings. And then if you could just move to the next slide. So this is a look at the building currently. So the building on the left, you can see there's that stairway that comes in. So that brings you all the way up to where the first floor is. Again, 3-4 feet above where the floodplain elevation is. All the living space will be above that. So on the left side, there'll be a 1-story addition on top. And on the right side where Delicious Market is, there'll be a three-story addition added on top of that. And all 6 units will be placed above that. Again, the building structure itself is really going to stay the same aside from, exterior and interior renovations, but the actual walls and structures will all remain as is. So the floor elevations will stay the same. And then, again, all living space will be located above.
Okay.
I'm happy
Hey,
to answer any
Eric.
questions. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So you're ready anyways.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I can
Thank
answer
you.
any questions you guys have. I think it might be the easiest way to do
Sure.
this.
Okay. What's going to be in the basement there? In other words, where the mechanical is going to be?
The mechanicals will be above on the first floor or higher. Make sure they're above the floodplain elevation. Again, that first floor of the residential is significantly above the floodplain elevation, and they'll all be either on that first floor or higher.
Okay. Okay. Just want to remind members of the public to provide public comment. Please raise your hand or type in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you're calling in and cannot use the platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute yourself. Send your questions to staff via email at cc@boston.gov or via Twitter by tagging the Twitter handle @BostonEnviro and using the hashtag ConComHearing. Elena, do you have anything on this?
Nothing further. No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Long,
I have nothing on this, Chair.
thank you. Commissioner Wilson,
Me neither, thank you.
thank you. Commissioner Richmond,
I just want to make sure I understand that the way into the building is at what elevation now?
So the site grades on Brook Street, they range between elevation 15.5 to a little over 16, but the entryway to the residential has 5 or 6 steps up and in. So the residential is 4 feet. It's 4 feet and like a half an inch above the grade there, and it's going to remain there. So entry will be up those stairs and in, which is about 4 feet above the floodplain elevation. The commercial entry will remain where it is. There's a door right at grade that you can come in off the street.
Okay, so what, and the only way out of the building at that level is stairs?
That's correct, yes.
And what if you have a handicapped tenant or owner?
My understanding, and unfortunately the owner's not here with me tonight, but my understanding is that there's no requirement for there to be any accessible units in this building, but I can double check and make sure for you on that.
Okay, well, I mean, I guess I'm interested in that. But I'm also interested in, does that mean that the owner wouldn't be renting to anybody who needed access in some way other than walking up the stairs?
I think the short answer is yes, but again, it would just be something I have to double check. I don't think there was a requirement that that the building required any accessible units. But I can verify.
So I mean, it's not just a question of accessible units. It's a question of if people needed to get out of that building. And it's, I think it's great that the stairs are above the floodplain. I think the floodplain is, the numbers we're using may be too low, but let's just say that they're not. I just think that having, the only egress, regardless of whether it's a, I apologize, my dog is going berserk. The only egress is at a level and in a way that even if somebody were visiting, they wouldn't be able to get out. So it's a concern of mine in all of these buildings that are as close as they are to the floodplain. So I'd be interested in knowing what the owner of the building is thinking about on that subject.
Okay, and to be clear, Eric, you would have to go to ISD. ISD would make you analyze this. If you had any requirements, ISD would enforce that before you could get a building permit, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And I was just trying to verify with the architecturals. Yeah, the architecturals that had been previously submitted well, I don't have the plans in front of me, unfortunately, but I have contact with the architect that yeah, there are no accessible units in the building.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Herbst?
No questions from me.
Okay. Elena, anybody from the public raise their hand?
I am not seeing any hands raised.
Okay. So with that, I would entertain a motion to close the hearing. Do
So moved.
you have a second?
Second,
Thank you. Commissioner Long,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond,
I'm going to abstain.
okay, Commissioner Herbst?
Aye. I
vote aye. So that is 4-0 with 1 abstention. Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is notice of intent for DEP file number
you, guys.
00619. You're welcome. 0061939 in Boston file number 2023-028 from Thoth Infrastructure and Environment LLC on behalf of the Massachusetts Port Authority for the proposed repairs to the Logan Ferry water taxi floats located on Harborside Drive in East Boston. Resource areas are land subject to coastal storm flowage, designated port area, land under ocean, land containing shellfish, 100-foot buffer zones to coastal bank, rocky intertidal shores, and land subject to tidal action. Who's here on behalf of the applicant?
Madeline School, environmental manager in the Capital Programs and Environmental Affairs Department at Massport. And I'm joined also by Susan Nilsson from Thoth Infrastructure and Environment, as well as Chet Myers, the Maritime Program Manager and Project Manager for this project. And with that, I will pass it over to Susan.
Great, thank you. I'm happy to present the project. If we could go to the slides, you can go right to the next one. So the project location, this is the, it's located on Harborside Drive. It's the MBTA Logan Ferry Terminal in East Boston, and this serves both ferries and the water taxi service, going from Hingham and Hull, as well as from Boston over to Harborside Drive. Next slide. So the purpose of the project is for public safety as well as to maintain public infrastructure. These floats are showing signs of wear and tear, primarily in corrosion, but also in some of the steel components. Looking at, we have a number of photos I can share. Looking at the steel decking, you can see that that's corroded and scaling. And then photo 3 shows the access hatch. Some of these are unable to be opened and require replacement. Also depicting the transition plate here. And if we could go to the next slide, just have a few more photos just to show the gangway plate is missing the caution strip. I mean, some of these are minor, but still just wanting to highlight. And also, the gangway pins require replacement. That's causing some of them to be off alignment, which, as you can see in photo 9, creates a potential tripping hazard, just being a little bit off grade there. So looking to be able to address all of these items through maintenance, again, of existing infrastructure. We could go to the next slide. Shows an overall site plan. You can see there's a series of floats. They're labeled here. The primary area we're looking to work is the area that's shaded. It's shown as float R2 and S3. And there you can see above that is the gangway system that provides access down to the floats. We go to the next slide. I talked a little bit about it as we went through the photos, but the proposed repair plans include restoration of the float edge. So some of that edge stripping, the connections between the floats, there are pin connections there that require replacement, and then replacement of 2 hatches and gangway pins, and then also restoration of the deck. So that's the work that would require removal of the corroded surface down to a surface that would be ready to receive a new coating system, and that would preserve that steel and minimize the future corrosion on it. And then looking at reballasting the float, which we need to get in with the access hatch and be able to reset that. And then potentially we'd look at also repairing the coating on 16 of the steel pipe piles. The steel pipe piles are what's anchoring the float in place. So the next slide. So as we stated at the beginning, the coastal resource areas the floats are located within land under ocean, a designated port area, land containing shellfish, and within land subject to coastal storm flowage. And then they're also within the buffer zone to the coastal bank and rocky intertidal shore, all of which you can see on the photos here. And then if we go to the next slide, we'll talk about the construction methodology and the impact. So we anticipate that this work will be done from a contractor's barge. I provided an example photo just because to show the spuds, because we expect that the contractor's barge will have spuds for anchoring in place. That will be a temporary impact. We estimated 19 square feet, assuming, I think it was pretty large size. I looked at 24-inch diameter, which the spuds are probably smaller than that, but just looking for the maximum impact for 4 spuds. That's a very temporary impact. It's just when the spud is placed in the bottom that you would have it drop. It's done by gravity and placed. And then once that's removed and the barge leaves the site, that impact would no longer have I'm sorry, I couldn't tell if someone was asking a question. And then on the temporary impacts, we also could have a small staging area on the land side that is an existing developed site. But we may want some space for the contractor if he needs to access from land in addition to the barge. Keeping in mind that their materials for this work are primarily steel, replacement or aluminum for the gangway. And so there really isn't any sort of stockpile or loose material as part of these repairs. We did include in the notice of intent and intend to include in the solicitation for bids a requirement for the contractor to provide a containment system for the surface repairs. Depending on their means and methods, we would expect that to include shrouds or collars around the work area to be able to absorb and minimize any not just debris, but any of the grit from the removal of that surface, as well as a vacuum system to be able to take in that loose material as it's generated through the grit blast. And then we would also have absorbent or containment booms just on the surface to be able to make sure that any debris was managed. And when I say debris, just anything that might come off of the work area to make sure they could capture that and recover it from the waterway. So I know I went through very quickly, but it's really high level. It's looking at repairing those existing floats, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Just want to remind members of the public to provide public comment. Please raise your hand or type in the chat. The application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you're calling in and cannot use the platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute yourself. Send your questions to staff via email at cc@boston.gov or via Twitter by tagging the Twitter handle @BostonEnviro and using the hashtag ConcomHearing. Elena, do you have anything on this?
So I think the only question I had that wasn't answered during the presentation was whether there's any sort of consideration going into this specifically as far as climate impacts go, and if the area has already been impacted by, for example, like rising sea levels, and what sort of impact that's had on it, and if that affected any of the repairs that you're choosing to do.
Sure. Well, I can start, and then I welcome Chet or Madeline to chime in. The repairs that we're doing, because it's a floating system and it rises with the tide, we didn't look at for the float specifically any changes there. I don't know if Madeline or Chet want to comment on the gangway system or if that's been looked at in the past, but I know there's some flexibility built into that to achieve ADA compliant access.
Sure.
At all times.
I can speak to that, Susan.
Sure.
So yes, so there are actually 2 gangway systems servicing the floats. One which maintains ADA compliance through the upper range of the high tide portion of the system, and one which maintains ADA compliance for the lower tide range of the system. And that's usually required in Boston Harbor because of the 10-foot tidal range. The piles themselves are not anchoring the system. They allow the system to float up and down as Susan indicated. And they actually they stretch pretty high above the floats, which would allow the system to float up and down, even as a result, even with the increased elevation anticipated as part of climate change. Massport does have a fairly robust program with regard to resiliency, and is addressing that at its facilities where applicable. But in this particular case, there's no hazardous materials stored in these locations, and the system itself is really designed to work with the tides and work with rising and falling water elevations. I don't know if Madeline, you want to say anything more.
No, I think you covered it. Thanks, Chet.
Thank you so much.
Elena, anything else? Go ahead.
No, that was it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Long?
Could you describe a little more about the reballasting procedure?
Partially, and I might look to Chet to chime in on that, but in terms of the reballasting, so the floats are listing. So when we have access through that panel, we will look to see if we have to provide, if there's any sort of loss of the buoyancy through, we might have to do a repair, but we will really have to be able to get in to see what that is for the reballasting.
Sure, and I can add to that briefly. One of our concerns is that that the floats are taking on a little bit of water. I'm sure you saw the condition of the hatches and of some of the steel in other locations that we're going to address. In some cases, we believe that not all the time. It's not like we believe that they're sinking. That's why we didn't file an emergency request. But possibly when there's heavy waves during a storm, that water can wash up on top of the barges and might be infiltrating into the hatch areas that are highly corroded. So as a result, when there's water inside the barges, they're typically ballasted when they're brand new to be perfectly flat. And as they potentially take on water, or if they corrode unevenly, they can start, listing to one side or another. Once we're able to get inside, we'll have a better idea of what the potential issue is. And if we have to, we can add additional weights to make sure that they float properly if they were corroding unevenly or have some other issue that's causing them to list. Or we can just, if there is water in there, we can pump it out, and we're replacing the hatches as part of this. So we'll be able to reseal the environment and make sure that it floats properly.
All right, great. Thank you, Chet and Susan. That's the only question I had.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Wilson?
The only question I had was whether you guys had guidance in terms of like what the top height of the top elevation of pile caps should be sort of going forward. I know this is an existing structure and you're not gonna, magically adjust pile caps, but whether that was in something that you guys had developed or not, because I know there's a few other places around the harbor that probably could benefit from that sort of guidance or have similar issues coming before us soon.
Right, we did not evaluate the existing top of pile elevation with regard to the floats. I can appreciate your question, and I think it's going to be coming up a lot in terms of the sea level rise and storm intensity and what float should be designed for that top elevation. But I don't know that I can offer anything specific to this site. Wasn't part of our scope, unless Chet, you've looked at that separately.
No, I know Massport, as well as the city of Boston, has looked at potential future flood elevations, and I'm sure it weighs in on future designs for floating systems such as these. Most of the systems that Massport has are fixed, for example, at Conley Terminal or at the cruise port. This particular system is one of the few that we actually have that has floating units, as well as our fireboat dock. I expect, because we're coming close to the end of useful life for really both of those systems over the next, let's say, 5 years, or perhaps a little further, that we'll actually start getting into that at some point, and we will definitely be coming before the commission when we do. As Susan indicated, these are sort of more short-term items that need to be addressed to maintain the usability, the public usability of the facilities. But in the long run, we will be looking at full replacement likely. And when we do, that's definitely something that we'll focus on, and we'll be sure to communicate that back to the commission when we do get into that.
Yeah, thank you guys for leading the charge on a lot of this stuff, and yeah, appreciate that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Richmond?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Herbst?
I may have missed it. Did you say what the work would be on the 16 steel piles?
That was a recoding effort.
And
There's
I just interested to understand that a little better. It's because it sounds like everything you, other than maybe this that you had described, was not even in the water.
right. The rest of the work was on the floats themselves. For the piles, it would be blasting or sanding down that existing coating, and that's when I talked about we'd want to put a collar around the base to collect that. And then getting to a clear surface so that it would be ready to accept a new coating system. And again, that's just to try to minimize the risk of corrosion long term. There's a lot of wearing on the piles from the roller system or the fender system. So that's where we're seeing the coating stripped down and some corrosion in those areas.
And is that something you need to work with the tides, or
you would want to do it at the low tide?
low tide.
Yeah, to get as much as you could, because that's where you have the most corrosion, is in that intertidal area. Exactly.
But I don't know, do you get down to no water at lowest tide, or will you just go as far as you can go?
Go as far as you can. And it has a bit of a cure time, so it's always a little bit of a race to get that last layer closest to the low water mark once it's installed.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Great. Thank you. Elena, any raised hands?
I am not seeing any raised hands.
Okay, thank you. With that, I entertain a motion to close the hearing.
So moved.
You have a second.
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner Long?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson? Commissioner Richmond?
Aye.
Commissioner Herbst?
Aye.
I vote aye. Commissioner Wilson?
Oh, sorry,
Might
I
have
didn't.
lost. Okay.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I vote aye. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So that passes 5-0. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
Next item on the agenda is notice of intent for DEP file number 0061942 and Boston file number 2023-031 from LEC Environmental Consultants, Inc. on behalf of the Massachusetts Port Authority for the proposed rehabilitation of a 3.44 acre portion of a container yard located at 700 Summer Street, South Boston. Resource areas or land subject to coastal storm flowage, designated port area, 100-foot buffer zone to coastal bank. Who's here on behalf of the applicant?
So once again, Madeline Sewell with Massport, and this time I'm joined by Mark Manganello from LEC Environmental Consultants, and I believe he'll have a little assistance from Rock LaRochelle from HDR.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madeline. Mark Manganello with LEC Environmental Consultants. We filed this notice of intent on behalf of Massport in collaboration with HDR Engineering. The first slide, I believe we have some slides. Yes, this is for the Conley Terminal Berth 12 pavement rehabilitation project. I presume everyone on the commission is somewhat familiar with this location, Conley Terminal. The graphic in the top right shows the entire Conley Terminal in some perspective with the surrounding waters. The bottom left shows the actual project area, sort of zoomed in, highlighted in red. So this project is a 3.44 acre portion of the larger Conley Terminal. We could go to the next slide. So this shows the area again. So the project involves excavation and removal of the existing surfaces and existing drainage structures within this area, followed by full depth rehabilitation of the asphalt and concrete surfaces. There'll be new drainage improvements, including a new trench drain to improve drainage collection. Go to the next slide. These are some representative photos of the area that show the poor conditions of the surfaces there. Deteriorating pavement, poor drainage. The project's designed to obviously resolve some of these issues within the project area. And I should say this is part of an ongoing improvements program at Conley Terminal. There are multiple projects, a couple of which have already been completed. So they're sort of, Massport is sort of chipping away at these issues section by section as time and funding allow. And the next slide, please. So the introduction indicated the resource areas associated with this. This graphic shows you exactly where those are. The blue line here is the coastal bank. The red line is the buffer zone to coastal bank. And the entire Conley terminal is within land subject to coastal storm flowage. We're talking, and it's also a designated port area. The total square footage is, as I said, 3.44 acres. That's the entire project footprint, or 149,974 square feet. And then a very small portion is within the buffer zone to coastal bank. Land under the ocean is nearby to the north, associated with the Boston Harbor Reserve Channel. And the next slide, please. This slide shows some of the engineering. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to Rock to talk a little bit about the engineering details.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Madeline. As Mark indicated, this project is the continuation of the master plan build out of Conley Terminal overall. It's a relatively small part of it, but you can see from the conditions of the pavement and the drainage that it's in need of repair. So this project will just be a pavement rehabilitation of that project area. There are no raised structures. There'll be some drainage improvements, as Mark indicated, with trench drains going to existing outfalls, so no new outfalls. Part of the project does involve a rehabilitation of a concrete top of an existing oil water separator that we'll be repairing. There was a photo that showed that and some of the exposed rebar associated with that. So we'll be repairing that as part of the project. The overall intent is to improve grading and drainage to eliminate that puddling and to deal with some of the maintenance issues and concerns that they have for year-round operations of the terminal. No new outfalls are being proposed as part of this project. Excuse me. And no significant changes in grades. We're basically putting back pavement that was there today, and there's no new impervious areas that are being proposed as part of this project. Sorry, I forgot to mention the photo on the top, or the clip on the top of this slide, represents, I guess, a typical section of what the improvements include. So on that, to the left of that would be the reserve channel, and that just depicts what section of the area we'd be repairing, and it kind of shows you where the trucks fall and where the container stacks are and the big gantry cranes that operate through there. Part of the project does also include repairing and replacing some of the concrete runways that the big cranes run on. So that's all part of that work as well. Did I miss anything, Mark?
I think you got it all.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? How many oil water separators are there in this area of work? Is it just one?
That's correct. It's one existing one that is there.
Okay. So what happened to it? How did these things break down? Is it because they're
it's just the cover that's being repaired over time with the containers that are dropped on top of it as they come off the ships. It's in the state of disrepair right now, so we're just going to be repairing the top. And in the future, I think they're going to restrict placement of those containers on top of that structure, and hopefully we won't be doing this again in another 15 years.
Great. Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Okay, thank you. Eleanor, what do you have on this?
I think all of my questions were answered in the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Long?
Yeah, I think I'm interested in these drainage improvements and any consideration you might have had for coastal storm flowage or increased storm frequency with climate change.
It's a great question. Mark, is that something you want to handle?
Yes. Well, I'll try. I think broadly the project is going to improve drainage. So, we're going to get increased frequency and intensity of precipitation events and flooding events. So it will improve the ability of this portion of the larger Conley terminal to accommodate those situations. But we're also somewhat limited here in this location in terms of sort of bigger picture, larger engineering options for dealing with those problems, because this is limited to just rehabilitating a segment of a larger facility.
Thank you, Mark. And could you speak to, or maybe Mark or Rock, to the water quality units that the stormwater flows to?
It's an existing oil water separator that's been in operation for some number of years. I don't recall exactly what year it was put into place. It's going to remain operational. It gets cleaned out periodically by Massport. In one of the prior projects, there was also a duct bill that was put on the existing outfall, what we call outfall 17, to deal with some of the backwater conditions with the rising tides in there, and also to help them clean that facility out. It has some hand-operated gates that are operational inside that are used for containment and as they're cleaning that facility periodically. And Audrey, did you have something to add on the drainage systems? I'm sorry, my associate Audrey is on as well.
Yeah, hi, Audrey Bullock, HDR. There are 2 existing recently installed water quality units from the last project that they did right next to this one that were installed, where some flow from this project flows to them as well. So there'll be treatment through those as well. And then also the existing well water separator. So all the water is going through one of those 3 units before it goes through the existing outfalls.
So those 2 prior installed water quality units were brought to this commission before the last project, what we call the M555 project, that has been built and is in place now. So a small portion, I think, on the western side of this particular site flows to those. What we did is we did not change any of the drainage characteristics of what's out there. So what it was designed for continues to flow in that way.
Wonderful. Thank you all. That was my only question.
Thanks, Audrey.
Thank you. Commissioner Wilson.
All good here. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Richmond.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Herbst.
I'm just wondering, does this get reviewed also by the Boston Water and Sewer Commission?
It does not. They do not have jurisdiction here. Madeline, I'm not sure if you want to speak to that at all.
Yeah, just what you said, basically, because it's only touching the stormwater, their Massport owned stormwater structures and outfalls. No Boston Water and Sewer.
Okay. I'm sorry, we don't have Commissioner Sullivan here tonight. No questions from me.
Yep. And thank you. That was going to be one of my follow-ups. Okay, so before we move on here, what can we do to make sure that operations don't impair the oil water separator? Is there going to be a sign? Is there a cutout? Is it impossible to put a container on it? Or how do we make sure that that stays functioning?
I see. So you're asking about making sure that there's no more damage to the top.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that current unit, I believe, has been in place since the early 90s or mid 90s. So it's seen quite a bit of damage over the years. And one of the things that has been made clear, by the current design team over here is that I believe they're going to be striping around it to ensure that containers are not dropped on top of that facility just because of the nature of it, and to keep it clear and open for maintenance. So there's going to be some changes made in the striping plan where containers can actually be dropped.
Okay, better. Okay, good. Thank you. Elena, anybody raise their hand?
I am not seeing any hands raised.
Okay. So with that, I would entertain a motion to close the hearing.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Seconded.
Thank you. Commissioner Long?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson?
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond?
Aye.
Commissioner Herbst?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. And I vote aye. That carries 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next item on the agenda, request for a determination of applicability from the Department of Conservation and Recreation for the proposed resurfacing of existing pathways along the west side of the Hatch Memorial Shell Lawn located at 47 David G. Mugar Way in Boston. Who's here on behalf of DCR?
I am. I can start the very brief presentation. Next slide, please. Good evening, Executive Director Itamari and Commissioners. I am Jenna Johnson, DCR Project Manager, and with me tonight is DCR's Environmental Permits Coordinator, Liz Gordon. The proposed project will repair existing paths along the west side of the Hatchell lawn, the area indicated in green on this slide, to repair damage caused by tree roots. Heaved pavement presents a potential tripping hazard to park visitors. Of special concern are persons using chairs or canes. Impacts of this maintenance project are minor and or temporary in nature and are limited to in-kind repairs within the path existing extent and grade. DCR respectfully requests the Boston Conservation Commission find this proposal adequately protective of the public interests identified in the WPA and issue a negative determination for the proposed project as currently designed. Next slide. As shown on the plan, again in green, work shall consist of installing erosion and sedimentation control devices, installing soil and tree protection fencing, grinding and resurfacing the bituminous concrete pathway. Again, drainage patterns will not be altered and path grades will meet and match existing grade. Work schedule is projected to be a 2 to 3 day duration or perhaps shorter. So Liz will now describe the resource areas present. So thank you. And Liz?
Thanks, Jenna. As seen on the previous slide, the project is within the 100-foot buffer to the bank of the Charles and the municipal 25-foot waterfront area. But there will be no impact to resource areas as a result of this project since it's all maintenance in kind. So any impacts will be temporary and minor. And I'm happy to answer any questions about the resource areas in the location of the work.
Okay, thank you. Just want to remind members of the public to provide public comment. Please raise your hand or type in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you're calling in and cannot use the platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute yourself. Send your questions to staff via email at cc@boston.gov or via Twitter by tagging the Twitter handle @BostonEnviro and using the hashtag ConcomHearing. Okay, 2 quick questions. One is what sort of erosion controls are you proposing?
We propose straw wattles lining both a potential staging area and the work area. And we will also have sacks for drainage structures, which we don't expect to be impacted, but just a belt and suspenders approach.
Okay. Next question. I think I saw that you might be pruning some roots. Does that involve taking down any trees, or how does that work where you prune a root but the tree remains viable?
We don't anticipate cutting any roots. However, if there is a root, sometimes they pop up, or, if something unexpected happens, we do have a protocol. We'll consult with our DCR arborist. We will use new blades, essentially sharp blades. It's important to get a clean cut and not rip and tear roots. And we will cover those cuts with wet burlap until the area is backfilled.
Okay, thank you. Elena, do you have anything on this?
I don't have any questions, but I just want to note that if the commission would prefer to not see an NOI for this, we should probably talk about conditions tonight before closing the hearing. And we could also use conditions that would be consistent with those used with Christian Herder Park and any other tree protection or other related conditions that the commission would want to see.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any in mind besides, are you suggesting we use the Christian Herder Park conditions to put into the decision?
I would say yes. So I would say that those would be the ones that I'd recommend. And then beyond that, if anything comes up from the discussion with the rest of the commission, then we could also add those.
Okay, makes sense. Commissioner Long?
Perhaps a question for Jenna. How did DCR become aware of the tripping hazards?
Just kind of routine maintenance. There's also been a focus on this area because of the addition of a statue, a memorial statue. And so we were concerned about the pavement heaves.
All right, understood. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you. Before I go to Commissioner Wilson, one quick question, no, comment, I guess, is I did see in the RDA, you mentioned that this is, or you were claiming exempt status because this is a roadway. I don't think that that fits for the exemption. This is a walkway. There are no cars on it, no vehicles in the ordinary course. So to the extent that we vote on this tonight, we will be not determining that that the project enjoys an exemption because it's a public roadway. Commissioner Wilson?
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering if the sort of heaving from the tree roots was in any way related to some of the decompaction activities you've been taking on the lawn in the previous phase of work.
I don't think so, because the pavement grade is intact except for at the location of the what we believe are tree roots. So there's no displacement at other locations or adjacent to the lawn.
Okay. I mean, my understanding was is if tree roots are at the surface like that and a swelling, they're typically searching for water at the surface, and that indicates that there's not percolation going down further. So I guess I might be a little bit skeptical in terms of if you're just replacing in kind, that you're not going to have a similar problem in the near future. So I was kind of wondering if between trimming the roots and then maybe some sort of different subgrade or air spading or some sort of, structural fill or something like that, whether that might provide a longer term solution.
We can certainly talk to the DCR arborist about that. The thought was that the trees are in relatively good condition for urban trees, urban parkland trees, and we want to disturb them as little as possible because of that. They do seem to be getting adequate moisture, most likely because the lawn is irrigated, and because off season the lawn is protected from pedestrian access. So there's no compaction of the lawn on a regular basis, on a daily basis. We feel like the trees are in pretty good condition, and we want to disturb the tree rooting zone just as little as possible.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Sort of try to do as little harm as possible. So, okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Richmond?
How come you guys didn't file an NOI?
We felt that this was minor maintenance replacement in kind work. It's under 300 feet of pavement. And we just felt this is the kind of public safety maintenance work that we need to do throughout the DCR system. And it didn't raise to the level of resource impact, that would be required by an NOI, but I should probably let Liz answer that question. Liz, do you have anything to add?
No, I would agree with what you just said. And with the exception of the 25-foot waterfront area, it is only within buffer zones, and there's no increase to any impervious surface or not even any, aside from the tree roots, there's not going to be any impact to vegetation surrounding the pathway. So I felt that an RDA was sufficient for this work.
And how do you respond to what the chair said about it not being exempt because it's a roadway?
We thought it was exempt. Are you talking about from a butter notification, Commissioner?
No, from what the chair just said. Yeah.
Yeah, my point was you put in the RDA that it enjoys an exemption because it's a public roadway. And I don't think this footpath is
No.
within the definition of a public roadway. Though that doesn't impact the RDA analysis. I just want to make sure when we're voting that we are not sanctioning that this is an exempt project.
Yeah, I mean, but that's part of why they think it's exempt, I think. You know, that's an area that is heavily trafficked all the time. You know, I love the fact that you guys put up your fences to keep people off the lawn, with the result that it becomes about 6 inches of goose stuff rather than people. But how long, when is this project supposed to start?
If we get a negative determination, it would start as soon as our maintenance contractor could schedule it. So hopefully, you know, early June at the latest, before the busy season of special events begins. If we do not get a negative determination, unfortunately, it will remain as is through the summer, and we will try to return to you and secure conditions, and then do it in full.
And assuming that you get a negative determination, and I should tell you that I'm not probably going to vote in favor of that. How long will this work take?
The work would take less than a construction workday. We wanted to be, you know, generous because construction can sometimes take a little bit longer. So we were saying 2 to 3 day duration. But the expectation is that if equipment were mobilized at the end of one workday, the work may be finished the next day.
So let me understand what you're going to do. You're going to pull up the existing asphalt.
Mhm.
And what happens to that existing asphalt?
Any additional material would be.
Well, it's not additional. It's there. Okay, so what happens to it?
It gets removed from the site.
Okay, and so you're going to pull up the asphalt, and then you're going to trim these roots. Is that the idea?
We will not trim the roots if they do not need to be trimmed. We will do exploratory work, looking for the depth of the roots from the path surface. We anticipate that they are lower than 2 inches, and so we will mill 2 inches. If we find that the roots are within the top 2 inches, then that's the situation where we may have to shave the roots, or lightly compact to raise the sides of the roots without shaving them.
And so you're saying this is all going to happen within 2 or 3 days?
Yes.
Okay, and what is the length of the area that is in consideration for this? How many linear feet are you going to be removing of the asphalt walkway?
On the west side of the lawn, it's about a 275-foot segment of pavement. The path is 12 foot wide. And then there's a connecting path where there's another heave. So we thought it made sense to capture that repair as well. And that's about 25 feet long. And that path is about 8 foot wide.
And how are you going to pull up this asphalt?
So we're going to mill it. So the milling machine basically scrapes the top 2 inches.
And that's all you're going to remove is the top 2 inches?
That's correct. So essentially the top course. So it's not a full depth reconstruction. It's just a path repair, a milling and repaving.
And somebody has decided that whatever heaving is happening is going to be within those 2 inches.
Well, that is our belief, but we want to test that to make certain that we protect the tree rooting zone.
And how much more work is involved to do an NOI and actually remove the asphalt and have barriers in place and all the things that you would be required to do if there was an NOI?
I think that we are recommending that the same barriers that are around the lawn, that additional barriers be brought in to do the riverside of the path and protect the planting areas there. And our typical construction detail for tree protection is at the drip line or beyond, as far away from the stem of the tree as possible. And it is 6 foot high chain link fencing. And we actually thought that the bringing that 6 foot high chain link fencing in and securing it with posts might actually do more damage to the tree rooting zone than the barriers. So that, that was why we thought this simpler approach for a 2 to 3 day project would be actually more protective of the tree rooting zone.
Is there some way that you can make the determination that in fact it is 2 inches or whatever you think it is without pulling up all of the asphalt and, going full bore, as it were? Is there some way to determine whether or not you're right?
Yeah, no,
before you
Commissioner,
start this?
that is exactly what we propose in the project narrative. We will either core or, use other means like chip away at a crack to determine the depth to tree root.
I'm sorry, now I'm confused. So how much of the and I really want to be finished with this because other people are waiting, but how much of the 275 feet or whatever you said it was, are you going to be exploring to see whether or not your theory is right?
Over that extent, there are only, I apologize, I don't have the number, but there are only about 4 to 6 heaves. It's just that we didn't want to have patches. We wanted to have a smooth surface for that extent of paving and meet existing grade. So, the heaves are only in certain locations along that 275 feet segment of path. And we have some images. I did not include it in the presentation because I was concerned for the commissioner, the length of your agenda this evening. But we did have some existing conditions photographs, and you may have those in your packet that show the character of the existing path and then the occasional heave.
Okay, I appreciate your answers. Thank you very much.
Okay, Commissioner Herbst?
Just a quick question, and it just maybe our commissioners are more familiar with trees. Didn't ask these questions, so it maybe I'm just not understanding, but it would seem to me that anywhere you see a heave like that, sort of by definition, the root is in the way, but it sounds like there's something I'm not quite understanding about that. It might be lower than it looks, even though the pavement is heaved up.
Than 2 inches.
And that would be sufficient. Okay. I think an RDA is workable for this kind of a project. I think it's limited activity, and I think with an NOI, you'd probably be proposing the exact same thing. So I don't have an issue with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Agreed. Elena, anybody from the public raise their hand?
I do not see any hands raised. No.
Okay, so with that, I would entertain a motion to issue a negative determination of applicability with standard erosion control measures, also with some tree protection conditions lifted from the Christian Herter Park order conditions that we issued to DCR previously. And again, I'll state it again for the record that this isn't a vote that's condoning or conceding that the project enjoys an exemption as a public roadway. Do I have that motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner Long,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond,
No,
Commissioner Herbst,
Aye.
and I vote aye. So that carries 4-1. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, there have been a number of continuances. Continued our notice of intent for DEP file numbers 006-1704 and Boston file numbers 2020-007, DEP file number 0061772, Boston 2021-010, DEP file number 0061820, Boston file 2021-045, continued as a request for determination of applicability from Norwood Engineering regarding 2 Starling Street, 34 and 36 Willette Street in West Roxbury. Continued also notice of intent for DEP file number 0061928 and Boston file 2023-018, DEP file 0061930 and Boston file 2023-024, DEP file number 0061772, Boston file number 2010-010, and a request for an amendment to the original order of conditions for DEP file number 0061821. And now the commission will begin its regular meeting. First item on the agenda is a request for a certificate of compliance for DEP file number 0061558 for the Olmsted Green Mixed Income Rental Phase Project, part of a multi-phase mixed-use development at Harvard and Morton Streets located in Mattapan. This has been continued from the February 15th, 2023 hearing. Eleanor, what do you have on this?
Yeah, so staff performed a site visit and requested additional information following that, which has been provided. But we also recommend continuing this item until we're able to review the materials further with the applicant.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I would entertain a motion to continue this request for a certificate of compliance for DEP file number 0061558.
So moved.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner Long,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond,
aye.
Commissioner Herbst,
Aye.
and I vote aye. That carries 5-0. Next item on the agenda is a request for a certificate of compliance for DEP file number 0061867 in Boston, file number 2022-026 for the addition of a second story and associated infiltration chamber and landscaping work located at 125 Havre Street in East Boston. This was continued from the February 15th, 2023 hearing. Eleanor, what do you have on that?
Sorry, just for the record, it's 121 Havre Street. I think just, sorry about that. And then for this, we conducted a site visit on May 16th, 2023, and no construction materials were present. The site was clear. There are photos that have also been included in the materials, in the hearing materials for this for the commission. And we recommend that the commission issue a certificate of compliance, given that the conditions appear to have been met.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I'd entertain a motion to issue a certificate of compliance for DEP file number 0061867 in Boston 2022-026.
So moved.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second,
Thank you. Commissioner Long,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond,
aye.
Commissioner Herbst,
Aye.
and I vote aye. That carries 5-0. Next item is a request for a certificate of compliance for, you're welcome, DEP file number 0061855 and Boston file number 2022-017 for the installation of 6 concrete supports for an open pergola frame and 2 supports for a small fenced enclosure located at 65 Atlantic Avenue in Boston, continued from the March 15th, 2023 hearing. What do you have on that, Eleanor?
We don't have any updates for this, so we would recommend continuing this one as well.
Thank you. So with that, entertain a motion to continue this request for a certificate of compliance for DEP file number 0061855 in Boston 2022-017.
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner Long,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond,
Aye.
Commissioner Herbst,
Aye.
and I vote aye. Okay, next item on the agenda are administrative updates. What do you have, Eleanor?
Yes, so this was included in your folder as well, but staff issued a conditioned administrative approval for repairs to a walkway and capstones on Castle Island. The repairs to the sidewalk are in the area closest to Sullivan's, and the capstones which require repair are on Fort Independence. I've also included the letter and conditions which we provided with that administrative approval. And I'm happy to answer any questions or discuss this further.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from any commissioners? Sounds like a no. Okay, thank you, Eleanor. Anything else?
Thank you. Another update is that we attended, or we visited Stony Brook it was Commissioner Herbst and Commissioner Long, myself and Christopher Edwards, and we took a look at some of the work that had been done there.
Okay, so what are we going to do? Are we going to call DCR? Do we have to issue an enforcement order? What's the upshot?
So Commissioner Herbst, if you wanted to provide your thoughts on this as well.
Sure. I think we do need to issue an enforcement order and probably should have DCR in. I know that they, have responded to some degree and said they've done some training. I've been pondering ways to connect them with DEP. So I guess I'd want to give some thought to what kind of conditions might make me be more confident that we're not going to continue to see this kind of thing. Just thinking about possible options of them needing to connect with DEP circuit rider or something to get some outside training beyond their own.
Okay, that makes sense. So is there, it sounds like we've been talking about this with DCR for a while now. We heard a lot of good things at our hearings. It sounds like they've been pretty non-responsive. I mean, can a letter get their attention and tell them that they need to file a post-work NOI with us? Or is the only way we're going to get their attention is with an enforcement order?
Well, honestly, one reason to do an enforcement order is that it will go to DEP. I feel like their fellow agency that cares about the Wetlands Protection Act should know that that DCR is fairly flagrantly violating the act. So that would be, in my book, the reason to go through that formality and get that on the record, because I think there's a lot of history with them. I also, if Commissioner Long wants to comment anything about what he saw, I know he took some photos.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything Commissioner Herbst is saying, and just that some of the conditions of the repaved areas, especially parts where it was already going into disrepair, were cause for concern to me, and really very close to resource areas. So it was a good site visit and definitely made things a little more clear to me in terms of work they did that did violate the act.
I think they still owe us also some understanding of at what level this occurred and how. It's clearly something that had to be bid out and done. They put in erosion control roughly where the wetlands were. I mean, it was a fairly flagrant 1 mile of paving that they did.
Sure. Okay, so good to know. So why don't we do this? Let's take the next 2 to 3 weeks. I guess it's 3 weeks of the next hearing. I don't know if we've ever issued an enforcement order to DCR before. What I would like to do is, we always have issues with the order of conditions. So I would like to have staff discuss this with legal as to what the best way to go about doing this is, because we want to get them in. But I also don't want to start I don't know, a 6-month to 12-month discussion over whether we have the authority to issue an enforcement order to DCR. As you see what they do with the order of conditions, they try to pull a lot out based on some amorphous case law that, you know, doesn't exactly stand for what DCR's counsel says it stands for. So why don't we do some research into what an enforcement, if we've done it in the past, that would be really good to know, and how that transpired, so we have a roadmap, if that makes sense.
I understand. Okay, so there may be issues I'm not thinking about. I will say I have experience with issuing enforcement orders to DCR.
Thank you. There
I
we
know
go.
it can be done, but not with the city of Boston. So, you know.
Yep, I appreciate that. So let's also have a conversation, maybe early next week. I'd love to hear what your experience is.
Sure. Yeah, and I do
Okay.
want to. I do want to get to the important point of getting better compliance with them. So if I'm not going in the right direction, I'm open to hearing that. But I'm pretty frustrated with what I see. From
Yep. And that's why I asked. It does sound like an enforcement order. I'm just not sure we've done it, and I just want to make sure we do it correctly.
Understood.
Yeah.
And
Be
Chair
efficient.
Parker,
Go ahead.
so that I'm clear, other than looking into whether we've done this in the past, is there anything else that I can look into in the meantime to help with the process?
Yeah, so maybe you could, why don't we discuss it? Because I've had several discussions with legal about our jurisdiction over DCR in the past, and there's some case law out there. So I'd like to take a look at it again. And we have had conversations. I'm sure that there's been turnover in the legal department, but whoever the lawyer is assigned to the Concom, we might want to schedule a call with him or her, yourself, Commissioner Herbst, and myself, just to talk this out a bit, so we can, again, make sure we're proceeding down an effective path that doesn't blow up into a conflagration.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is acceptance of the order of conditions for a notice of intent for, well, I guess you've separated these out, haven't you? Okay, so I'm going to do them
Sorry
en
about that.
masse. That's
Yeah,
all
oh,
right.
yeah.
Next item on the agenda is acceptance of the following orders of conditions. Notice of intent for DEP file number 006-1937 and Boston file number 2023-026. Notice of intent for DEP file number 006-1940 and Boston file number 2023-029. Just those two. So could I have a motion to accept those orders of conditions?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Long,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond,
Aye.
Commissioner Herbst,
Aye.
and I vote aye. That passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is acceptance of the meeting minutes from April 5th, 2023 and meeting minutes from April 19th, 2023. Are they both reviewed and
And-
ready to go, Eleanor?
So we're going to recommend that the April 5th minutes are ready, but because of the timeline of them, we would recommend holding off on voting on those until the next hearing so that the commission has adequate time to review. And we also do not have the April 19th minutes ready.
Okay, so we're going to hold off. Okay, so with that, our last favorite motion to adjourn by acclamation. Are there any objections? If not, go Celtics.
All right. Thanks, Michael.
Okay, thank you. Good night.
Good night.
I guess.